So my favourite movie of all time is Inside Llewyn Davis, and I've known that ever since I first saw it when it came out. I've just never been able to explain why, which means I've always been very jealous of people who have like a solid reason behind their favourite movie, you know, like it's the one that makes me laugh the hardest, or it resonates with my own personal experience, or I just loved watching it as a kid. For some reason, I just could not tangibly express why I love this movie so much, and it led me to really doubt myself, like not just whether it was my favourite movie, but if I ever properly loved it in the first place. So today, I'm not going to try and explain to you like why this movie is good, because it's kind of widely accepted, it's pretty decent. Instead, I want to tell you about the very turbulent relationship I've had with this movie, and hopefully find that reason why it's so special to me. And I do mean relationship, because this is the love story of Llewyn and Ewan. It really is a classic tale of boy meets movie, they fall in love, but some arbitrary misunderstanding, which is kind of more emblematic of the boy's own character flaws, leads them to break up. So this video is like my way of running to the airport to profess my love for Llewyn Davis and reaffirm my dedication to it as my favourite movie of all time. And I know what you're thinking, you know, gosh, Ewan, that all sounds pretty clever, bloody title even rhymes. It does sound a bit sad though, right? And I'm like, yeah. So our story starts on the 24th of January 2014, and at this time, there was one movie that everyone was talking about, and it was The Wolf of Wall Street. But I was 16, and the British Board of Film Classification apparently thought I was too young and immature to see that movie. I know. So instead, this nice young lad traded in the old cocaine and hookers for folk music and melancholy. Now, even at the age I was, you know, I did consider myself a bit of a film buff, but one of the biggest blind spots in my movie knowledge was the Coen brothers. I'd only seen one of their movies up to that point, which was Oh Brother Where Art Thou, when I was like 10. And that's a surprisingly great movie for kids. Honestly, watch that movie again. It's got a lot of slapstick humour, it's got catchy music, it is like a live action cartoon. I mean, yeah, there's some heavy racial elements, but it's probably better than some other kids' cartoons. I digress, but the point is, Inside Llewyn Davis was going to be my first proper Coen brothers movie. You know, it'd be the first one I see in a cinema, and also where I felt old enough to appreciate it. Because something I kept hearing was that you have to see their movies twice to really get them. And at the time, I think I was very intimidated by that, and I desperately wanted to get their movies on the first watch. So I went into this movie like I was about to listen to a relative's SoundCloud. I was going to pretend to like it no matter what. But thankfully I didn't have to pretend to like it, because as soon as it ended, I turned to my friend who I was sat with, and I said, I think that's the best thing I've ever fucking seen. In the months after, I went on to become what can only be described as like Twilight fangirl level obsessed with this movie. I learned the entire soundtrack on guitar, and I even got a part-time job gigging at a late night coffee house, which I was later fired from because they quickly realised that I really only knew how to play the Llewyn Davis soundtrack. It's not hyperbole to say that this movie had become a huge part of my identity, but soon I was heading off to university, and that identity came under a lot of strain. It's a very weird time for someone, like you're trying to reinvent yourself as an adult when you are still very much a dumb teenager, which means you sometimes end up kind of needlessly disavowing the things that defined you in school in order to create this new, more mature, cooler person. And there was something about my obsession with this movie that just didn't sit right with me. Because I couldn't articulate a reason why I liked it, it was like I was blindly in love, and that didn't feel very mature. It reminded me of those people who say that their favourite book is On the Road when they've read like 5 pages of it. And I would always look down on those people and think, you don't actually love that book, you just love the idea of it. You just love the romanticism of, you know, being a suffering young artist in bohemian 60s America who struggles against life's harsh cruelties, who just wants to smoke and write poetry and connect with people, and nah, you get it, I'm the clown. See, this is when it hit me. Maybe the reason I couldn't explain why I like this movie is because I really didn't. You know, maybe there wasn't that much separating me and the Twilight fangirls. What if the real reason I liked it was just that it fed this well of deep teenage angst that was within me at the time? And all the hot boys. You know, they say that some movies just hit you at the right time in your life, but what happens when that time has come and gone? This was the beginning of my very long breakup with this movie over what turns out to be several very arbitrary misunderstandings, which happens to be the title of the next chapter. So first off, I think it's already an eyebrow raiser that any 16-year-old would say that this is their favourite movie, because, and this is putting it very lightly, the movie is ungodly depressing. This is a film about failure, and not in a kindly, oh, isn't it the greatest teacher of all kind of way. It's the story of one man hurtling towards this inevitable and very painful realization that he has sacrificed and poured everything into his art, only to find out that no one gives a shit. And the movie follows him over the course of 1 week, where he makes various attempts to fight that and to fix what he's broken, only for each one of them to backfire on him in cruel and spectacular fashion. It's like the more he tries to fight that inevitability, the deeper he sinks himself into desperation. And eventually that desperation breaks Llewyn's hope, and he's forced to abandon the only thing he had left. This is all to say that you could very easily add a post-credit sequence to this movie where Llewyn just becomes the Joker. So my question is, how does this guy, who as you can see was very creative, who had all the hope and naivety in the world, how did I gravitate towards such a downer of a story? Well, after considerable time thinking about this, I've discovered the reason why, and I hate to say it, but it's Rent. Because as well as having a Llewyn Davis obsession at the time, I was very into the musical Rent. And when I say I was into Rent, I mean I was in this deep. Rent, of course, is a story about struggling young artists in Bohemian America who just want to connect and struggle against life's harsh cruelties, and I should have done a fucking sport. The point I'm trying to make is that, like Llewyn Davis, Rent is technically quite depressing, but it is also performing this therapeutic function for a certain younger audience. These stories are about sensitive, misunderstood artists with unrealized greatness. And when you're a creative, geeky teenager, maybe not that popular in school, you feel the angst of those characters, that feeling that no one gets me, I don't feel appreciated. If only people read my Doctor Who parody script, that's just me. These characters kind of tell you what you want to hear at that age, which is, you are special, but you're just misunderstood. And I ate that shit up as a teenager. Other kids were going to parties and doing drugs. I was at home, huffing perks of being a wallflower like it was glue. Now, as you get a little bit older, you realise I wasn't actually this misunderstood creative genius. I was being a bit of an obnoxious asshole. That's totally normal. But the problem is that you sometimes look back on those characters that you loved at that age, only to find that they're still just obnoxious assholes. Like, I identified with Llewyn Davis so much that I was trying to emulate him in real life, but much like my younger self, if I were to meet him in real life today, I would kind of fucking hate the guy. Llewyn's devoted his whole life to music, and that's made him an incredibly selfish person who has neglected and hurt those closest to him. The same people that he now has to leech off of in order to continue pursuing his career. But somehow, Llewyn manages to be just as self-absorbed in these very pathetic circumstances. Llewyn genuinely views his own music as inherently more valid than other people's. To him, Jim and Troy are just fakers. They are tourists in folk music, whereas he cares about the authenticity of the art. And whilst there's definitely some element of truth in this, it doesn't change the delusions of grandeur and deep hypocrisy that are inherent in Llewyn's character. Because by the very nature of folk music, it is inherently inauthentic. They are all playing old songs that they didn't write. But Llewyn has held on to this vague idea that he is somehow important to keep him going, and it is mutated into this ego and severe lack of self-awareness. Like, yes, Hey Mr. Kennedy is a perfect example of the gimmicky pop folk of the time. But Llewyn can't really be too shocked that his song about a medieval cesarean section isn't reeling in the big bucks. Like a lot of teenagers, this cynical exterior is just a veil to hide Llewyn's deeper insecurities about his inability to sustain a career or a personal relationship. Llewyn is not the guy who takes out the guitar at the party. Llewyn sits in the corner and complains about that guy whilst desperately wishing that he was him. So my worry was, did I totally miss the point of this film by identifying with Llewyn, who's by all accounts a bit of a dick? But recently I've started to think that maybe my 16-year-old self has some hope, because I realised that, this movie couldn't have worked for so many others if it's just the story of some asshole getting what he deserves. Which goes to show the genius writing of the Coens. I mean, making this unlikable a character ultimately empathetic is like making a really offensive joke funny. Llewyn endures a lot of punishment throughout this movie, but it's not for us to laugh or wince at. It subtly contextualizes for us what these songs mean to him. The Death of Queen Jane is a spectacularly stupid song to play at an audition, but there's a reason that scene is heartbreaking and not cringe-inducing. And it's because we have the context of his illegitimate child. He's also been left with an infant that was born out of lost love. Llewyn isn't chasing success or popularity per se. He's chasing connection and recognition of what he's gone through. That is Llewyn's real frustration. Not that he's never going to become Bob Dylan, but because no one can see the difference between him and Justin Timberlake singing in a nice jumper. But the bottom line is, even with all this analysis I can do now, I still had to wonder whether I actually got this at the time. You know, what if I was just another victim to Case File 101? White male misses the entire point of the movie by idolizing the main character for his toxic character flaws, not in spite of them or because of the larger context of the film. But I realized that there's a big distinction between Inside Llewyn Davis and all the other stuff that I was into at that age. It's that these all end with hope, or more so, validation. The characters find what they're looking for. They find connection. For Llewyn Davis, he gets his nose broken. You know, if this movie was telling me anything, then it was literally the opposite of all that other stuff. That just because I'm misunderstood doesn't make me special, and the world is not going to magically reward me for it. Because the Coens don't give any sort of validation to Llewyn, they couldn't have given any to me. So what does this all mean? Well, the good news is that it kind of dispels my doubt that I only like this movie because it's strung along my very misguided teenage self. The bad news is, I now know even less why I like this movie. Why did this boy, this puberty nightmare made flesh, why did he respond to this movie the way he did? For a movie that is all about giving up on your dreams, why did I leave it feeling so inspired? And I think the key to what this movie means has to be in that ending. It's one of the bleakest, most brutal endings I've ever seen. And I thought they have to be saying something here. But as I watched more of their movies, I realized that there's kind of an inherent problem with finding meaning when it comes to the Coens. And it's that oftentimes there isn't any. The Coen brothers have become two of the most iconic filmmakers in recent memory, and there's a reason for that. A lot of it is up to their very unique style. Like, think about how many movies have been described to you as being Coensy. And when people say that, they're usually referring to one of the many motifs that pop up a lot in their movies. You know, dark comedy crime capers in rural America, quirky and clever dialogue, very attractive idiots getting punched. But you can't really pick one of those that genuinely encompasses their style. It's because they've played with so many different genres. No Country for Old Men and Burn After Reading were made within a year of each other, and they are both very Coensy movies. But as you can see, they're quite different. But there is one thematic thread that does run through a lot of them, even in Burn After Reading and No Country for Old Men. It's that they have this way of feeling like they're kind of about nothing. You know, their films feel very convoluted and overly simplistic at the same time. Characters have a lot of things happen to them, only for the world around them to change very little, and it heightens the absurdity of that world. And even though it's an adapted screenplay, No Country for Old Men is kind of the perfect example, where the leading character dies off screen, the main MacGuffin of the movie is rendered meaningless, and the ending implies that we'll never understand the brutality that humans can inflict. Bye guys, hope you liked it. And I would argue that Inside Llewyn Davis is probably their movie that has the most nothing in it, if that's even possible. The moment that best exemplifies this is when Llewyn's driving and he sees that road sign to Ohio, where the child he has just discovered is his son is currently living. Now, in any other movie, this would be the turning point. You know, Llewyn would give up his relentless pursuit of a folk career in order to accept his personal responsibilities and become a father. You'd drive off, and that would be the ending of the movie. It wouldn't just be moral redemption for Llewyn, but it would also be a very needed upper at the end of this dour fucking movie. But because this is the Coens we're talking about, none of that happens. Just keeps driving. And never gets brought up again.
Can you imagine the scene where he actually goes and knocks on the door?
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
This whole movie hammers in this feeling that nothing is going to change. There is an overwhelming sense that the world is against Llewyn and is actively fighting against him becoming successful. So it's not Llewyn's decision to quit folk music. He's simply succumbing to what was always going to happen. He doesn't find any bravery in his decision. He just gives up because he's exhausted. He stops fighting to stay awake in a world that's tired of him. And maybe that is all Inside Llewyn Davis was meant to be, you know, just a darkly funny reminder of the harsh realities of art and life. And the Coens like to perpetuate this nothing interpretation of their movies. They always downplay any sort of bigger interpretation. But as any artist knows, assigning direct meaning to your movie just prevents the potential of what it can mean to other people. Which is exactly what I had to think about. Like, regardless of what the Coens thought, what did this movie mean for me? And the one thing I knew for sure was that this movie didn't just open me up to the world of the Coens, it made me fall in love with folk music. Because folk music isn't just the background setting of this movie, it's in its bones. The story structure of the movie is directly inspired from a folk song. The opening scene being the first verse that depicts an initial incident. And then subsequent verses go off topic, telling other mini stories, before we return in the final verse to that initial incident, knowing more. You know, there's one line in the movie that directly talks about folk music, and it says, if it was never new and it never gets old, then it's a folk song. Because American folk music is a sum of traditional genres. You know, it's blues and country and bluegrass. But what makes it never get old is what new generations bring to the table. And the Coens are the exact same. You know, they're heavily influenced by classic film genre, but it's what they bring to the table, the spins they put on those stories, that make it so special. And Inside Llewyn Davis is no different. This movie is so much more than the indie dramedy it looks on the surface. But the brilliant idea that's at the heart of the story is how they turn the Star is Born story on its head. You've heard it a billion times, you know, where a moment of cosmic luck allows for a talented nobody to be plucked from obscurity and their potential realised. And Inside Llewyn Davis is about constant cosmic misfortune that prevents talent and potential being discovered. And the movie revolves around this one big meta joke at Llewyn's expense, that he is a character in the wrong kind of movie. But it's for this very reason that I've always felt weirdly hopeful at that ending. Because as brutal as it looks, I think it's Llewyn finally getting the joke. I think that's why that au revoir is directed at camera. He sees why we've been laughing this whole time. So why did this particular interpretation hit me at the right time? Well, I saw this movie when I was leaving school and having to decide what to do next. And our generation was kind of coddled to, you know, do what you love and follow your dreams, which is nice. It's just a lot of fucking pressure. It's like a nicer way of saying, make the right decision now or you regret it for the rest of your life. Now, you're lucky at that age if you even know what you enjoy, let alone what you want to do. And at the time, I was really into acting and musicals, but I didn't know if it was what I wanted to sign off the next 4 years of my life to. I was so scared of pursuing a creative career in case it didn't work out, in case I wasn't good enough, and then I'd be trapped by my own passion. And I realised that Inside Llewyn Davis was like my worst case scenario. It took my nightmare and it made it funny. It's why I love dark comedies, because it allows you to embrace the things that scare you and understand them and laugh at them. I think Llewyn's story showed me that life can be unfair and sometimes deeply fucking cruel. But if you can't step back and laugh every now and then, you're missing the joke. And someone who absolutely epitomizes this mantra is actually the man that Llewyn Davis was based on, Dave Van Ronk. So for now, I'm going to leave you with a story from the man himself. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. I had a great time making it. Subscribe if you want to see more. And hang around for the end for a very special surprise. It's not me naked or anything.
The House of the Rising Sun is on that record. Well, I'd never done that song before, but I heard it every night because Van Ronk would do it. So, you know, I thought he was really onto something with the song, so I just recorded it.
After he recorded it, I had to stop singing the song because people were constantly accusing me of having got the song from Bobby's record. Now that was very, very annoying. But I couldn't blame that on him, and I didn't. The whole thing was a tempest in a teapot. Later on, when Eric Burdon and the Animals picked the song up from Bobby and recorded it, Bobby told me that he had to drop the song because everybody was accusing him of ripping it off from Eric Burdon.
One, two, three, four. Blackbirds sing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings, learn to fly. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of a cold dark